Coming up on Market Shares, war in Israel, how the impact's spreading across the world and how it's impacting the markets.
Plus, fireworks in the courtroom as Sam Bankman-Fried faces fraud charges. We'll break down the star witness's testimony.
And the major markets are reacting to the conflict. We're keeping an eye on all three as they close for the week. Hold on to your wallets because Market Shares starts right now. Good afternoon and welcome into Market Shares. I'm Bradley Hoppenstein.
And I'm Annie Klaff. Let's start off our show this afternoon with the Israel-Hamas war coverage. Our Benjamin Schiller joins us now in the studio with the latest.
Hey, Bradley and Annie, great to join you this afternoon, but not under these circumstances. The Israeli on-the-ground counteroffensive has begun in Gaza, but Hamas, the militant group, is telling Gazans to stay put. Israel last night warned millions of Gazans to evacuate the northern strip. The United Nations is concerned, warning Israel to not do so because of the densely populated communities and the risk of a severe humanitarian disaster. Now, we are learning this afternoon that the Israeli Defense Force has begun its raids into Gaza. At this hour, we are hearing that Israel gave a Gaza hospital located near the border just 2 hours to evacuate all patients and staff. An attack in northern Gaza could come while we are on air at this hour, but we do know at least 1,300 people have been killed inside of Israel and more than 1,850 people are dead within Gaza. A total of 11,000 people have been injured this past week. Actually, I want to show you where the attacks have been recorded within Israel. This photo is from the Israeli Defense Force. They put this out yesterday. If you look at the map, most of the attacks are just north of the Gaza Strip. Most of the kibbutzes around the northern Gaza Strip is where the on-the-ground attacks from Gaza and Hamas are taking place. If you look outside of Tel Aviv, there's a lot of on-the-ground offensives there. Keep in mind, Jerusalem, which is towards the right side of the country near the West Bank, seems to be particularly safe. Not really much of activity over there. Hamas, as we know, is trying to target the major airport in Israel to block off any sort of transportation going there. Protests on both sides are continuing today. Tens of thousands of people protested across the Middle East today following Friday prayers. They're calling it the Day of Jihad or the Day of Rage, where people around the world are protesting in support of Palestine. French officials said there was an attack in northern France this morning where a man stabbed a teacher. France has issued a maximum security alert in response. At this hour in New York City, pro-Palestine protesters are crowding Times Square. The NYPD had also officers report for duty in case violence breaks out in the city today. Guys, this is a situation that continues to develop. It's unclear what is next in this war.
Ben, a lot to sort through there, but I want to go back to the evacuation order in Gaza that you mentioned. How imminent is this attack on the northern Gaza Strip?
Well, like I said, this could happen at any moment. This could happen during this program this afternoon. What we do know is that the raids have begun in Gaza. The Israeli Defense Force said that took place overnight. I do want you to keep in mind, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel said a couple days ago that all Hamas men are dead men. Israel wants to go all out in terms of protecting their citizens. Keep in mind, during this raid of Gaza, when they're going to be going in man by man to Gaza and all these villages and all these towns, they want to find weapons of mass destruction that they can possibly bring back to make sure Israel does not get hit anymore. And they're looking for hostages. We knew there's going to be a couple thousand hostages on the ground in Gaza right now, taken from northern of the border in Gaza. We do not know how many people are taken hostage, but we knew it was at least a couple hundred or even a couple thousand.
Now, Ben, let's talk about the U.S.'s involvement a little bit. President Biden just wrapped up his speech a few moments ago. What exactly did he say during this speech?
Well, President Biden just spoke a couple minutes ago about the Israel-Hamas situation. He is pledging that the United States will remain in support of Israel. They believe that Israel is in the right in the situation. They are supporting whatever they do. However, President Biden, the White House, urged Israel today to keep in mind to follow the rules of war. That means do not commit any war crimes of any sort in terms of bombing Hamas in Gaza. They want them to keep in mind that there are civilians who are not involved with Hamas or even the Gaza's or Palestine's input on this. They want everyone on the ground to make sure they are safe. Keep in mind, Gaza is a very densely compacted community. He did call, however, Hamas pure evil for their actions in this war.
Ben, phenomenal reporting and just an extraordinary situation that we continue to follow. Let's quickly take a look at some of the broader business and economic implications of these attacks, with more likely to come. A long list of major airlines around the world have stopped flights to Israel after the surprise attack. For the U.S., American Airlines canceling all flights to and from Israel through December 4th, Delta Airlines suspending operations through the end of this month, and United discontinuing service indefinitely. The State Department asking airlines to consider reversing their decisions with a number of American citizens still in Israel. Israeli airline El Al breaking its Shabbat ban on flights and will be flying tomorrow on its first Saturday in over 40 years. People trying to flee the country are facing a minimal number of flights and sky-high ticket prices. Hospitals on both sides also overwhelmed. Many on both sides now reduced to rubble.
On the foreign policy front, Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived to the country yesterday, pledging U.S. support for Israel and the use of American munitions and weaponry. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also arriving in the country today. Let's get to the markets now. Defense stocks surging earlier this week as the major U.S. indexes dropped. Wall Street still trying to sift through the market fallout of the war in the Middle East. Energy stocks and oil prices rallying this week. Meanwhile, airlines among some of the hardest hit. American, Delta, and United each fell more than 4%. Lockheed Martin's jump on Monday was its biggest since March of 2020, about 9%. And Northrop Grumman, another top defense stock, also surging about 9% earlier this week.
It's incredible. We continue to hear more and more news out of Israel. It feels like every hour there's some kind of new update. We see the markets, as we'll get to a little later, are mixed on the news, but it's an incredibly dire, incredibly horrible situation going on.
Yeah, especially with Netanyahu saying today that this is just the beginning. It's really terrible stuff.
Yeah, a lot to get through as we continue our show here. The horror of these attacks and the war that's been declared since. We have Luke Radel joining us now with more on the market fallout. Luke, oil prices jumped more than 3% after the attack. Do you think these high prices are going to stick around?
Bradley and Annie, good afternoon. In all likelihood, this latest uptick in oil prices is thankfully going to be a temporary one. That's according to Patrick DeHaan, the head of petroleum analysis at GasBuddy. He told CBS News that oil prices are up, but that's much more of a, quote, knee-jerk reaction to the turmoil in the Middle East. The major concern is that Israel and Iran could get into conflict. The reason why prices could soon level off is that neither Israel nor Gaza produce a lot of oil. So experts say the long-term effects on oil and gas prices should be limited, as long as no third parties from in or outside of the region get involved in the conflict. The primary concern for those in the U.S. is Iran. The government there congratulated Hamas terrorists for its offensive against Israel, but they have denied reporting by the Wall Street Journal that they were intimately involved in the attacks. In response to that reporting, Republicans and some Democrats in Congress have called for the U.S. to take a tougher line on Iran. Listen to South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham on CNN.
The Hamas has hostages, Americans and Israeli hostages. They start killing those hostages. If there's an attack by Hezbollah in the north, creating two fronts for Israel, what I would do is I would bomb Iran's oil infrastructure. The money financing terrorism comes from Iran. It's time for this terrorist state to pay a price for financing and supporting all this chaos.
Now, if our military did attack Iran's oil reserves, like the senator is suggesting, that would obviously have a massive effect on the cost of oil, among many other things. But while U.S. and Israeli officials say Iran is a primary supporter and funder of Hamas, they've yet to find direct evidence linking Iran to the planning of these attacks. Here's NSC spokesman John Kirby on the PBS NewsHour Monday night.
We're looking very hard to see if there is corroborating evidence that proves that Iran was, a participant in these attacks, but we just haven't seen it. And frankly, our Israeli counterparts, they haven't seen it either. But look, make no mistake, there's a degree of complicity here just because Iran's been supporting Hamas now for many, many years. Weapons, tools, capabilities, training. Clearly, Iran, there's a complicity here. But in terms of the specific series of attacks we've seen in the last 24, 36 hours, we just don't have direct evidence.
For now, analysts at J.P. Morgan Securities said, quote, it is anticipated that the U.S. administration will steer clear from actions that will directly impact Iranian oil supplies. If evidence like that is found or the conflict widens, experts warn that the U.S. could place harsher restrictions on Iranian oil, which could tighten global supply chains. Guys?
Luke, impressive stuff with your work here. How could this affect U.S. drivers?
Well, thankfully, as we said, the effect is likely going to be minimal because Israel and Gaza produce very limited amounts of oil, and also because of a seasonal dip in gas prices. So during the summer months, there are a lot more cars out on the road, and so gas prices tend to spike. But now that we're heading into the fall, that summer boom is going to be over and gas prices will go down, which should offset this recent uptick in oil prices.
Luke, why does turmoil in the Middle East lead to a jump in oil prices?
Yeah, according to the collective of oil-producing companies called OPEC, half of all crude oil reserves are based in the Middle East. So anytime we see conflict like this that could implicate some of the larger players, folks like Iran, that produce a lot more oil, including Russia could get involved here as well, outside of the region of the Middle East, there's a lot of concern in the oil markets about what that could mean for the supply chains going forward.
Luke Radel, thank you so much. We have a lot of other news we want to get to today. The star witness in the FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried's case giving some strong new testimony this week. Former girlfriend and executive in Bankman-Fried's crypto empire, Caroline Ellison, has given over a day and a half of testimony in federal court. She's one of 3 former members of Bankman-Fried's inner circle pleading guilty and agreeing to cooperate with the Manhattan Attorney's Office. Ellison says Bankman-Fried was the mastermind behind a calculated effort to steal billions from customers, investors, and lenders.
Prosecutors are trying to prove that Bankman-Fried was the main hand in massive fraud. He's accused of misusing billions of FTX consumer money by putting those funds in Ellison's company, Alameda Research. But as crypto prices plummeted and the value of Ellison's company and assets dropped, she says she was in a constant state of dread, knowing money from FTX customers was being used to repay loans, among other fraud uses. Ellison says Bankman-Fried knew he was taking big risks with the FTX money, and the collapse of his crypto empire gave her an overwhelming feeling of relief, because she was terrified with the truth of what would come out eventually.
Crazy story there, still unfolding. To the picket lines now. The United Auto Workers are still striking, now expanding their strike to Ford in Kentucky, one of the automaker's biggest and most profitable factories. Ford says adding this plant affects about 100,000 workers. The vehicle is made there, bringing in about $25 billion a year. Now, this is a shift in strategy from the union that initially said they didn't want to hit automakers too hard. Now, a top executive at Ford says the company has reached the limit of how much money it will spend to get a contract agreement with the union.
It's been about 4 weeks since the union began its walkouts against Ford, GM, and Stellantis. But while the walkouts continue to grow, talks seem to have stalled. Last week, the union said Ford's general wage offer is up to 23% over 4 years, with GM and Stellantis coming in at 20%. But union president said none of these are high enough. The inflection points in this strike being more pay and less hours. Also worth noting, though, that the 3 big Detroit automakers have laid off almost 5,000 workers at factories not among the plants hit by the UAW strikes.
It's crazy how these strikes affect people that aren't even directly on the picket lines.
Yes, certainly, and especially in terms of everywhere in the market.
All right, well, the IRS says Microsoft is short on its taxes. The company says it received notices of proposed adjustment on Wednesday. The government is asking for an additional tax payment of almost $30 billion. Microsoft plans to contest the notices through the IRS system of administrative appeal. In its filing, the company says, quote, we believe we have always followed the IRS's rules and paid the taxes we owe in the U.S. and around the world. Microsoft also saying they're willing to go to judicial proceedings if necessary.
Utah is joining Arkansas and Indiana as the latest state to file suit against TikTok. The state alleges the app misled its citizens about their relationship with its Chinese parent company, as well as deceptively claiming the app is safe. Government officials have been concerned about this relationship in the past because Chinese law could compel TikTok to hand over information about its users. Utah Governor Spencer Cox cited research about social media's effect in a statement. And in a statement, Cox said, quote, social media companies must be held responsible for the harms they are causing, end quote.
Well, if you like keeping in touch with your family, loved ones, and friends, one of the best companies at reeling in consumers to stay up to date with their new products is back at it again. Apple rolling out a new feature that allows you to leave a voicemail after a FaceTime call. All you need is an iPhone model made after 2018 and the iOS 17 update. Models after 2018 are anything following the 10S and 10R. You also might need to check to make sure your phone has enough storage for the update. It's essentially the same as a phone voicemail, but a video one that will pop up in the FaceTime app if your loved ones don't answer you like me.
Apple really keeps coming out with everything, but the IPO market is certainly struggling after ARM and Instacart have fallen since debuting. But Birkenstock is a new bad sign. The German shoemaker fell more than 12% lower than its original IPO price this week, and this drop makes Birkenstock the worst company debut over $1 billion in roughly 2 years. These struggles in the IPO market hint at weak investor demand, as well as planned valuations that don't make much sense. Birkenstock's original IPO valuation was over $9 billion, nearly double for what it was bought for about 2 years ago.
Wow, crazy. I was optimistic about that IPO too. Walmart CEO Bill Simon says consumers are starting to buckle for the first time in 10 years. He's blaming a number of reasons, including inflation, high interest rates, and student loan payments restarting. With customers pulling back, though, Amazon, Walmart, and Target are having sale events to get a head start on the holiday season. Shares of these companies have been under pressure over the past 2 months, with Target performing the worst, down 19%. Despite these concerns, Simon thinks Walmart has an advantage over its competitors. He says the company's food business will allow them to outperform those competitors.
Hopping back over to Microsoft, but in a very different way, Xbox is strengthening its edge in the video game industry, and this comes after Microsoft purchased video game creator Activision Blizzard for $69 billion, a deal that took nearly 22 months to finalize. This deal is the largest tech acquisition in history. Lots of parties were against the acquisition due to the threat of monopolizing the tech industry, but Microsoft's biggest obstacle, Britain's regulatory agency, was won over on Friday. This deal serves as an example for the continuously growing influence tech giants have over regulatory intervention.
About 17 minutes past the hours here, markets closing at 4 o'clock. We'll run through the rocky week and take a look at some of the biggest movers when we come back.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Dad?
Just 1 minute, okay?
Hey, Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
I couldn't tell you.
Can birds draw pictures?
I don't have an answer for that.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Welcome back to Market Shares, about 18 minutes past the hour. Annie, an uneasy week for the markets, and a lot of that is a reflection of what's going on in the Middle East. Let's take a look at how the markets ended the week.
As you can see, all three of the indexes are up, S&P finishing at 4,320, the Dow Jones at 33,623, and then the NASDAQ 13,400. Bradley, what could this be because of?
Well, it's really investors are concerned about the geopolitical risk when it comes to the Middle East. Of course, the U.S. also battling to figure out who's going to be the next Speaker of the House. Jim Jordan actually just getting the nomination. But it really depends, because unless the U.S. has a speaker, Congress can't pass any legislation when it comes to funding Israel and helping the war over there. Also an interesting week, a lot of earnings coming out this week, but because of the unrest in the Middle East, the market's kind of mixed, as well as consumer prices and inflation also up more than expected. We got our September report on Thursday this week.
Definitely lots going on, and we're going to take a look at a few market movers as well. As you can see here, we're going to talk about a little bit about Adobe ending up on a high, as well as Walgreens. Walgreens are really important after making a shift in their business model to focusing more on essentially as being a pharmacy and a health company. Really important for Walgreens, as you can see, finishing up 5.63%. It's interesting because Walgreens underperformed in 2 straight quarters, which has not been done in nearly a decade for this company. Stock was down about 35% for the year to date. But because of Walgreens' cost-cutting plans working effectively, as well as in implementing AI supply chain efficiencies, which we'll talk about a little bit with Adobe as well, Walgreens really ending up on a high here and making use of their cost-cutting moves.
It's really interesting how all these companies are finding some way to get in the AI game, in the AI game. Excuse me. But Walgreens obviously dealing with a lot, like you said, coming out of the pandemic and the demand for vaccines, tests, all that kind of stuff, just slowing down. Let's take a look at Domino's Pizza. I feel like we don't talk a lot about food stocks on this show, but here's the bottom line. Talking about the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, their prices have increased. Their supply has increased, their supply prices, and the shares fluctuating this week as a result of them missing on their third quarter estimates. But they're announcing some new programs to try to boost demand for the pizza chain again. Shares climbing about 4% on Thursday when they announced that news. So Domino's, they're partnering with Uber when it comes to deliveries. They're also launching some new promotions, including one where you could get a free pizza if you sign up for its loyalty program, which they're trying to make it easier for customers to earn and redeem points when it comes to their loyalty program. But their outlook on next year, we're not going to know for a little bit.
And this all comes after Domino's increased efforts in marketing, as well as their intent to bring awareness to their rewards program. Like you mentioned, getting that free pizza with an order of $7.99 on the app.
Well, when we come back, there's been a lot of uncertainty surrounding the former Cazenovia College campus, how the town plans to repurpose the area when we come back.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Here's to the straggly ones, the lopsided ones, the first ones, the I miss my beard ones. But hey, I look good with this ones. But no way he's grown that in the weak ones. The black, brown, red, and gray ones. That one. The itchy ones. The never forgotten ones. The ones grown by Dad. The ones grown for Dad. The started late ones. The absolutely filthy ones. The drawn-on ones, the finger ones, the pin ones, the I nearly didn't do it this year ones, and the yeah, why not ones. They all raise awareness, raise funds, start conversations, and save lives. Because whatever you grow will save a bro. Learn more at Movember.com.
Welcome back to Market Shares. Let's take things local here to CNY. One Central New York community is deciding what to do after losing a main piece of their village. And as our Ronnie Perillo tells us, some locals are feeling a void over by the lake.
Just a few months ago, these walkways were filled with students. But this fall, it's a more chilly feeling here in Cazenovia.
We don't need them, but we do miss them. At least I do.
After Cazenovia College announced its closure last spring due to financial struggles, nearly 800 students and over 100 staff members were left without a campus. And the village lost a nearly 200-year-old piece of its identity. Mark Viviano owns the tea shop on Albany Street, which is right across from the school. He says while locals and kids from nearby places like Colgate have been helping business, there are fewer new faces in front of the counter.
When they had their open houses, people would come to Cazenovia to see if they wanted to go to school here, and brought families in on the weekends. So I think we missed that traffic. Also, the college brought in vendors and professors.
There's a question on the minds of many Cazenovia residents, and it's what this campus will look like in just a few years. Well, today the Greater Cazenovia Area Chamber of Commerce met with residents to discuss those options.
Right now we're just talking about concepts, so there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm encouraged at the level of interest by both individual community members and organizations.
Cazenovians hearing several proposals today for the college site, from a school for learning differences to a senior living community. The property is currently for sale and is being leased as a New York State Police training academy for the next 2 years. Development will begin after that, bringing more visitors to the area and customers to local businesses. But college or not, this lakeside village continues to stay afloat. In Cazenovia, Ronnie Perillo, CitrusTV News.
Thanks so much, Ronnie. Coming up, Taylor Swift's The Eras Tour film opened up in theaters yesterday with skyrocketing sales. AMC says ticket sales have surpassed $100 million. Stay tuned.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Taylor Swift is not only selling out stadiums, but also movie theaters. Her Eras Tour concert film opening yesterday with $2.8 million in ticket sales over just 8 hours. The film is expected to make between $40 and $60 million on Friday and a total of $150 million through the weekend. Annie, these numbers would make the film the highest opening concert movie ever and one of the highest openings of 2023, period.
And not only that, but pre-sales for Swift's film has generated the same interest as Disney's Marvel and Star Wars franchises. Crazy that one person can top those. But movie theaters are also supposed to see a bump in concession sales as cinemas have designed specialty popcorn buckets and cocktails for the film. The film will be playing in theaters for the next 4 weeks and could continue given demand.
You know, I was reading all these stories over the summer when Taylor was doing her tour about how she was single-handedly boosting the economy in these cities she went to. Now she's boosting the decline that we've seen in movie theaters since the start of the pandemic.
And not only boosting the decline in movie theaters, but also boosting the sports industry as well. Indeed. And entertainment, obviously, of course. I mean, when she went to the to the Chiefs game, the president of Heinz saw her using ketchup and ranch together, and then they created a bottle just for Taylor Swift.
Is that so?
Yes,
wow.
It's incredible.
I also know the NFL game, the one she was at, I think it was last Sunday night, was the most viewed game since a few Super Bowls ago. I mean, the Taylor Swift effect, I know people joke about it, but it's real. And it's a little crazy when you think about how big of a following she actually has, not just here, but around the world.
Taylor Swift is a phenomenon just in herself. I mean, I personally wouldn't even consider myself a huge Taylor Swift fan, but you have to look at what she's done to all 3 sectors in music, entertainment, and sports. It's just incredible.
Yeah, she's crushing it. She's going to continue to crush it this weekend. But that's all the time we have for you today on this episode of Market Shares. Be sure to follow us on X and Instagram and check us out at CitrusTV.com for more of the latest. Till next Friday, I'm Bradley Hoppenstein.
And I'm Annie Klaff. Have a great night, Syracuse.